Thursday morning, a frigid Thursday morning, some freezing temps here in the Birmingham area this morning. Hope you're bundled up, staying warm. Appreciate you tuning us in. Conrad Van Order, John Saber with you for the next hour. Damian Mitchell playing a little musical chairs here with some of our time off for the holidays. So Damian Mitchell going to be off for the next couple of days. So me and Saber will be here with you, holding down the fort, getting you into the weekend. And we have plenty of college football news to break down this morning. We've got some head coaching changes in college football. One in particular that I know has gotten a lot of people's attention. We got the 2025 schedule reveals for the SEC. And while there's a lot of similarities to the schedules from this year, a lot of cases where you're playing the same teams, just at different venues, but some interesting details there in some of the schedules. We'll break those down for Alabama and Auburn and some of the more notable ones around the SEC as well. Also have transfer portal news. Seems like every time I open up Twitter, there's another quarterback getting in the portal. We got some buzz going around Auburn with some potential quarterbacks there. Alabama losing a quarterback yesterday. So a lot for us to get into here on Morning JOX. But let's start off with what's been really the big news in sports for the last 24 hours or so. And that is Bill Belichick, the former head coach of the New England Patriots. He has agreed to become the next head coach at the University of North Carolina. They're going to have a meeting today with the Board of Trustees to approve the signing. But as far as we know, they have agreed on a 5-year deal. We had heard a few days ago that essentially these negotiations were heating up. Bill Belichick went on the Pat McAfee show and was, had some favorable things to say about the process in very Bill Belichick fashion, essentially saying, we'll just kind of have to wait and see how it goes, but he had a good feeling about it, and now it looks like that is going to be finalized today. So this is a shocking move, I think, for a lot of people, just for a guy like Bill Belichick, who I think a number of us were surprised when he was available last year, and we know he interviewed, I believe, multiple times for the Atlanta Falcons head coaching job, and it certainly seemed like he was going to wait around and probably get back into the coaching ranks in the NFL this offseason, but he decided to make the jump to college. And it's just very interesting in the world that we live in with college sports. How Bill Belichick transitions to the college game, I think, will be very, very interesting to see. So we know he presented essentially what was reported as a 400-page document to the officials there at North Carolina, essentially outlining how the organization would need to be structured, what the commitment to NIL would be, his vision for the future of the program, and how to set it up not only for success while he is there, but believably set it up for success so that his son can then take over when Bill Belichick ultimately decides to hang it up there in Chapel Hill. So a very interesting situation. Again, we've seen a lot of guys. You look at somebody like a Chip Kelly that was the head coach at UCLA who, I guess, took a lower position being the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. But some of these guys not really seeming to want to deal with the pressures of being a head coach in college football and all of the different problems that creates now with NIL and recruiting and transfer portal and all of these different things that have become part of the job there. So to see a guy like Bill Belichick, who isn't the little rigid, maybe similar to a Nick Saban type, except even more so. And I think we had questions about coaches like Nick Saban and, well, in this new era, do they really relate to the kids? And does this tough coaching work? And Bill Belichick certainly doesn't seem to fit the mold of a modern college football coach, in my opinion, at least, Saber. But he's certainly a heck of a football coach. He knows what he's doing. It's just managing those 18, 19, 20-year-old personalities is a little bit different than the NFL.
Well, seeing as how I think he's doing that in his personal life, he may be able to do that in his professional life now.
That is a good point. Yes.
I do find it interesting. If you remember the 21 draft, that the meme that's going around with his dog that was sitting there when they cut to Bill Belichick. You know the dog's name?
No, I do not.
Nike. What kind of school is
yeah.
UNC? It's almost like as if it was fate.
Maybe you're right there. I did not know that, but he does have somewhat of a connection to North Carolina. His dad, Steve Belichick, he was an assistant coach at North Carolina back in the 1950s. So there is somewhat of a connection there to Bill Belichick and North Carolina. But when he was asked, or part of his statement about the head coaching opening, Bill Belichick said about the job, quote, "I grew up around college football with my dad and treasured those times. I've always wanted to coach in college, and now I look forward to building the football program in Chapel Hill." I certainly don't think it's intriguing for a lot of us. It'll be very interesting to see what the NIL commitment starts to look like for North Carolina, and if this, because I mean, I would imagine, let's be honest, with Bill Belichick being 72 years old, I mean, you did technically get younger because Mac Brown was 73 years old. Do we think that he's actually going to be there for more than 5 years? And so it's just how quickly is North Carolina expecting this thing to get turned around, and what kind of a financial commitment are they willing to make on that front in order to try to have success next year, you would imagine, with, kind of a ticking clock there around Bill Belichick. So a very interesting move there. Again, they will have a board of trustees meeting there today at Chapel Hill to finalize the signing of Bill Belichick. But as far as we know, they have agreed to what will be a 5-year deal. We will have to wait and see what the compensation is for Bill Belichick. But we do know he's also going to bring along Michael Lombardi, who is a former NFL executive. He worked with Bill during part of his time there in New England. So he's going to come over as the general manager, which we now know has become a very important position in these college programs. So he will hold that position there at North Carolina. And it is believed that Bill Belichick's son, who was the defensive coordinator at Washington this year, he will join his father in some capacity. And as I kind of talked about earlier, there seems to be a strong belief that ultimately his son will be viewed as the coach in waiting. And this will be a situation where Bill Belichick will come in here for a few years, try to turn the program around, and then hand it off to his son to be the next head coach. Another interesting tidbit, though, about the North Carolina coaching searches, I don't know how many of us would have had this on our bingo card, but according to sources, if Bill Belichick had not been named the head coach at North Carolina, the runner-up to be the Tar Heels' next head coach was Tommy Rees, the former offensive coordinator at the University of Alabama, who has been a tight ends coach with the Cleveland Browns this year. So I thought that was interesting tidbit that kind of came out afterwards, that Tommy Rees was essentially viewed as the runner-up to be the next head coach there at North Carolina. We also have more coaching news, some here locally that'll impact a lot of people here locally. Is Rich Rodriguez has officially agreed to become the next West Virginia head coach. Of course, he worked there previously from 2001 to 2007. He had 3 10-win seasons during his initial stint there in Morgantown. Also had a Sugar Bowl win over Georgia in 2006. Came very, very close to making a national championship game while he was there. Of course, that rivalry game against Pitt that ultimately knocked West Virginia out of the national title hunt there, but had a lot of success there. And now Rich Rod, the last few years at Jacksonville State, has done an excellent job. Won a conference title this year, beating Western Kentucky last weekend. And he has done really just an exceptional job. And so now you had Neil Brown, who left from Troy to go up to West Virginia. And now that he is on his way out, they come back to the state of Alabama and get Rich Rod for a second stint there at West Virginia. So I know a lot of JSU fans going to be sad about that move, but very well deserved for Rich Rod, who, again, just has done such an incredible job at Jacksonville State and overseeing their jump up into the FBS levels of competition and the success that they had last year in their first season, and now in year 2 to have back-to-back 9-win seasons and to win the Conference USA Championship this year. He's done a remarkable job, and I think West Virginia is one of those schools that, I honestly had higher expectations for them this year because I kind of surprised a lot of people with how good they were last year. And unfortunately, that success didn't really carry over for Neil Brown this year. But West Virginia is one of those schools for me, Saber. I just always look at them as they're one of those schools that when they're good, it just makes college football better, right? Because I feel like the atmosphere that they bring is good. And they're always one of those teams that, they're fairly competitive, but I guess I just have a lot of memories of when I was growing up, and namely when Rich Rod was there, and some of the highs that we saw from West Virginia. And they're just one of those programs that I always enjoy and feel like college football is a little better when West Virginia and their insane fan bases having success.
So college football has been good, like what, once,
Yeah.
twice? Like it
Essentially, yeah.
It feels like they've outside of 2007, which was a great year for him, and just make a kick, all you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
McAfee, by the way. It feel like they're not up there as one of the schools that you would see constantly in the kind of championship hunt, but they are a school that always seems to be not bad. And every now and then, okay, hey, yeah, you messed around, you won 9, 10, whatever games.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. And maybe they're okay with that, but the fan base is passionate there. You see a lot of great coaches come from that state. So,
Yes.
the love and admiration for football is there. So hopefully hopefully Rich Rod can come back and continue the trend of coaches that were there once before finding success again, because we've seen it maybe not as much. And we started off kind of with Greg Schiano. We've got Scott Frost going back to where he won a national championship at UCF. We see a bunch of, I don't want to call it retread because that sounds dismissive, but those coaches have had success before. They know the formula, so hopefully they can replicate it.
Yeah. And Rich Rod is just one of those guys that's he just had a very interesting coaching career. I mean, I think we all know the situation here in Tuscaloosa, and at one point it looked like he might be the next head coach, and then ultimately ended up being Nick Saban. But for him now to, there's just, it happens every now and then, but guys that are getting an opportunity, like you saw with the Mac Brown, guys that go back to a school that kind of made them into the coach that they are, and getting a chance to go back there later on in their careers is always a cool thing to see. But of course, after his time at West Virginia, he then went to Michigan, where things did not go particularly well for him up there in Ann Arbor. He was then the Arizona head coach for a while, before getting back into things at JSU. And of course, all of the stuff there with Alabama and his flirtations and that near hiring of him back in 2007. Just a very interesting career that he has led. But Rich Rodriguez is now heading back to Morgantown, where he will take back over as head coach of the West Virginia Mountaineers. And then finally, the last nugget of big head coaching news, at least in college football right now, is over there in Las Vegas at UNLV, you had Barry Odom, who was named the Purdue head coach here recently. So UNLV trying to fill that void. And if these reports are any indication, we may have a very familiar name heading over to take over at UNLV, and that would be one Dan Mullen. So according to Football Scoop, Dan Mullen and UNLV are in deep discussions and working to finalize a deal to make Coach Mullen the next head coach there at UNLV. So that would certainly be an interesting move. Again, Dan Mullen, a guy that, there were some rumors not long ago about him potentially going to Norman, and maybe there being some interest in him being the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma or another school like that. And honestly, with Coach Mullen, it was just a situation of, when is he going to want to get back into coaching? It is more a matter of if, not when. But, I think we can look back now, and he's one of those cases where you look at what he did at Florida, and I understand some of the frustrations that people had, but, I think maybe some people took for granted some of the things that he was able to accomplish there. Obviously had a great stretch, or a great run as the Mississippi State head coach, but for now, him to get back and get an opportunity to go coach a team like UNLV, who was one game away from being in the college football playoff if they had knocked off Boise State this past weekend. It'll be interesting to see how that one plans out, because, you got to recruit, and I guess you can use the transfer portal more, but that was notoriously kind of his downfall there at Florida was, he notably was not a guy that loved recruiting and loved hitting the recruiting trail very hard. So
I don't know, maybe he getting away from it, I don't know, maybe it energized something that he may want to recruit more, or maybe he'll take the Lane Kiffin approach and focus solely on the portal. But I always thought he was a pretty good coach, and I would not be surprised if he had success there. He's just, will he be able to want to do all this year round? Because he famously said that, I'll talk about recruiting during recruiting season. Like, this is the season now. We'll talk about it later. Well, it ain't like that no more.
Kind of year round now.
Yeah, and maybe he realizes that, but also I think it's smart of him to go to a place where, even though there are expectations and a bit of a standard, it's definitely not like it was at Florida. And I could have seen him taking a job like a West Virginia, maybe like a Purdue, that, hey, I don't have to get it turned around immediately. I can take my time, and if I win 8-9 games, they'll be more than happy. And UNLV is probably like that, but you got to do somewhat better though.
Yeah, and you do, and that's just that's the reality for any coach in college football in today's day and age. But I mean, UNLV is certainly set up for success again, as I mentioned. I mean, they were just a game away if they had beaten Boise State last weekend from being in the college football playoff. And Barry Odom was there for 2 years, went 19-8. So they're certainly on the come up and certainly set up at least for the near future. You would think to be able to carry that success forward, especially if they're able to go in there and Dan Mullen and the job that we've seen him do with quarterbacks throughout his career. That'll be a fun one to watch out. And UNLV, one of the better surprises in college football the last couple of years as well. So that's your big coaching scoop. Again, Bill Belichick agreeing to become the next head coach at North Carolina. That looking to be finalized later today. Rich Rodriguez, he will be leaving Jacksonville State and heading back to Morgantown to have his second stint as the head coach there at West Virginia. And reports coming out now that UNLV and Dan Mullen are working to get a deal done to make Dan Mullen the next head coach there at UNLV. So we also have 2025 SEC schedules to look to. Yesterday, we got the full reveals, all 16 teams, what their schedules look like for 2025. We'll break down those for you for Alabama, for Auburn. Who has the toughest schedule? Is it still Florida, or is there another team kind of creeping in there that might have, at least on paper, the most difficult schedule heading into 2025? We'll break down all of that for you when we return here on Morning JOX and JOX 94.5. 621. Welcome back into Morning JOX here on your Thursday morning. Conrad Van Order, John Saber with you till the 7 o'clock hour when we hand you off to McElroy and Kublik in the morning. They'll be with you from 7 to 10. Then I will be back alongside Landrum and Molly for three-man front from 10 to 2. And then the Paul Feinbaum Show will wrap up your day from 2 to 6 right here on JOX 94.5. All right, so we broke down some of the big head coaching news around college football, namely Bill Belichick moving over to North Carolina. I wanted to throw this in there real quick before we get to the SEC schedules for 2025. So I saw this tweet this morning, and I thought it was pretty good. So if you remember Max Johnson, he was started off, he's the quarterback, started at LSU, then transferred to Texas A&M, then transferred to North Carolina. Really unfortunate couple of years for him with injuries just kind of derailing his college career, but he's been around for a number of years now. And so at the end of his playing time in college, when Max Johnson hangs up the cleats, these will be the coaches he will have played for in college: Ed Orgeron, Jimbo Fisher, Mac Brown, and Bill Belichick. It's a very interesting collection of head coaches that you will have had. And that's in what, 6 years you'll have had those four guys?
Rather interesting murderer's row right there.
Yeah. And yeah. And three of those guys have won a national championship, and one of them's won 6 Super Bowls.
Most. Yeah,
that's
as a coach.
Yeah, that's a pretty good track record there, but that's just a wild collection of coaches there that Max Johnson will have played for over the course of his college career. All right, let's get to some SEC scheduling news. So yesterday, the SEC officially unveiled the schedules for the 2025 season, and we will start off, we'll look at Alabama and what they have coming up in the 2025 season. So, of course, you have the season opener that is going to be played in Tallahassee, as Alabama is going to take on Florida State to kick off the season on August 30th. Then week 2, you're going to get Louisiana Monroe. Week 3, you're going to get Wisconsin on the return trip. They're going to be coming to Tuscaloosa next year. Then you're going to have a bye. And then to start off SEC play for 2 years in a row, Alabama is going to face Georgia, but this time in Athens. So that'll be on September 27th. You're going to follow that game up again with Vanderbilt in Tuscaloosa, though. You don't have to go to the scary confines of Nashville, Tennessee, to play that one next year.
No cranes
Alabama
in the background.
fans. No cranes in the background. That's right. Then you're going to have, you're going to go to Missouri on October 11th. You're going to get Tennessee at home there in the third Saturday in October. Go to South Carolina October 25th. Then play LSU at home, then you get a bye week. Then you get LSU at home, Oklahoma at home, Eastern Illinois at home, and then you wrap up with the Iron Bowl there down on the Plains. So, again, not too different from this past year. Again, you still have Wisconsin on there. You are going to play Florida State, which, again, this game looked different when they scheduled it. I can't imagine that Florida State's going to be worse next year than they were this year. But certainly that seems to be a game that's maybe not as intriguing as it was a couple of years ago when you were looking ahead to that matchup. But, I mean, you have a very tricky stretch here where you have Tennessee at South Carolina, LSU, and then, I mean, an Oklahoma team that beat you this past year. And again, I think they're in the same boat of I would expect them to certainly be better next year. And you do have a bye week mixed in there, but that's 4 tough games right there. And really, I mean, you look at Tennessee, South Carolina, and LSU, those are going to be 3 really, really tough opponents 3 weeks in a row there for Alabama.
What really stands out to me is how difficult the road schedule is going to be. I mean, there's no neutral site, which I guess is fine. Alabama's finally starting to get away with that. You're going to see a lot of home and homes over the coming years, at least out of conference. But at Florida State, at Georgia, at Missouri, at South Carolina, and at Auburn, like that, I mean, one that's life in the SEC, but also not quite sure what all of these teams are going to be yet, but with assuming at least a new quarterback and probably 3 at least new skill players and remade offensive line going on the road a lot like this where Alabama already struggled. It's going to be a daunting task next year for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right about that. And I mean, you know, you could argue, well, you don't have to go to Tennessee or LSU. Well, you'd probably like to go to LSU because you have a great track record there. Tennessee, certainly difficult, but I mean, that South Carolina game, I mean, you look at the game this year, I mean, I think it's fair to say that if that game was played in South Carolina this past season, there's a good chance the Gamecocks win that one just with how close the margins were in that game. And plus, I mean, I think South Carolina, it's going to be interesting for them next year because now that we have expectations for them, how will it be when you have maybe not a target on your back, but nobody's going to be surprised by South Carolina next year, I don't think, and how good they are. So that one will be interesting. That's going to be a tough one there for Alabama. So yeah, that's your stretch. As Saber mentioned, a pretty tough road schedule going to Florida State, to Georgia, to Missouri, to South Carolina, and then to Auburn. But you do get Tennessee, LSU at home. Now looking at the Auburn Tigers and your schedule for the 2025 season, you're going to open things up in Waco, Texas, taking on the Baylor Bears. Then you're going to have Ball State and South Alabama back-to-back weeks at home. So not like this year or the past couple of years where you had, 5 straight home games to start the year. That's not going to be the case for Auburn this next year. But then after South Alabama, you open up SEC play on September 20th by going to Norman to take on Oklahoma. Then the next week, you're on the road to Fayetteville to play Arkansas. Then the next week, you're on the road in College Station to play Texas A&M. Oh, and then the next week, you're on the road in Nashville to play Vanderbilt. And then the next week, you are on the road to take on Missouri. 5 straight road games for Auburn. No bye week in between there. 5 straight weeks on the road in SEC play to start off for Auburn. That's going to be a tricky stretch there. But then you do come home. You get to play Kentucky at home. You go on the road. You get Kentucky at home. You get Mercer at home, and you get Alabama at home. So if you're Auburn, that's a tough stretch there with having 5 straight SEC road games. That's certainly going to be a challenge for the Auburn Tigers there. But again, I think for me personally, I think you like not having all of your home games stacked up there right at the beginning of the season. I think you like to have it a little more spread out. So hopefully that is something that benefits Auburn next year. But again, they're going to have yet another opportunity to start off pretty hot with Baylor, Ball State, and South Alabama. Again, we made the mistake this year, but you would hope you would be 3-0 at that point, starting SEC play before you then do have those 5 games on the road. So that's going to be a little bit of a difficult schedule there on the plains of Auburn for next year. Another one I wanted to mention. So if you go and look at Georgia's schedule, and we talked about how difficult Georgia's schedule was this year and how they have multiple losses for the first time and in a handful of seasons. And it's not going to be any easier for Georgia next year, but I did find it interesting the way they did the schedule. So if you're Georgia, you start off with Marshall and Austin Peay, but then you go to Tennessee on September 13th, and then you get a bye week, and then you host Alabama. So Georgia starts off SEC play next year with Tennessee on the road and then Alabama at home. I'm not saying that Georgia's going to be 2-2 to start the season next year, but there is a scenario where that happens. There's also a scenario where they're 4-0 and they'd be the number 1 team in the country at that point. But that's definitely going to be a tricky start of things for SEC play there for Georgia. You also have, I thought, just looking down and doing an overview of all of the rosters, all the schedules that I saw, I think Oklahoma probably has a strong argument to have the most difficult schedule in the SEC for 2025. So you have Michigan. That game's going to be in Norman, so that helps you out, but you're going to play Michigan there in week 2 for a non-conference game. You're going to start off with Auburn. You have Texas. You have to go to South Carolina. You have Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Alabama. Those games are all consecutive, by the way. These are the last 7 games for Oklahoma next year. Texas, at South Carolina, Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Alabama, Missouri, LSU. That's a pretty tough 7-game stretch there.
Yuck.
For Oklahoma. That is certainly not favorable, in my opinion. So that's going to be a tough one for them. Florida, again, they have another difficult schedule just like they did last year. You got to play Miami again. Of course, you still got Florida State there with the rivalry game. But how about Texas, right? Everyone, we've been talking about how weak Texas' schedule was, and they've only played one good team this year, and they lost to them both times in Georgia. Well, they're going to step up a little bit because you're going to have your season opener at Ohio State. That's going to be one of the biggest games of college football next year. Texas at Ohio State to open things up. But then you get 3 straight weeks of San Jose State, UTEP, and Sam Houston State before you kick off SEC play, where you have You have to go to Florida. So again, I think again Florida, a team we expect to be improved next year. Going to the Swamp could be tricky, but then you have Oklahoma. You have to go to Kentucky, to Mississippi State. Then you have Vanderbilt. You go to Athens to play Georgia. Then you have Arkansas and Texas A&M at home to wrap it up. So again, the Ohio State game is going to be tricky to start the year off, but another year of a favorable schedule for Texas in year 2.
It's eerily similar to Auburn's schedule in the fact that all of September, Texas will be at home, and all of October, they won't play at home.
Yes, essentially. I mean, you get to play in Dallas for the Red River, but
right. But if you're a season ticket holder, like throughout October, like you can find something else to do.
Yo, yeah,
because
yeah.
your Saturdays, at least at DKR, will not be there because at Florida, Oklahoma for in Dallas, at Kentucky, and at Mississippi State. While those seem relatively easy, those are all on all 4 of those are away from home. So don't be surprised if Texas finds a way potentially to stumble just because you're on the road so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's it's going to be tricky for a few schools in 2025, but now that we've gotten, kind of this first year under your belt, you kind of start to understand how some of these matchups are going to play out, and now you get to see them in different venues, so that'll be very exciting to see coming up in 2025. But when we come back here on Morning Jocks, some of you want to chime in on the phone lines, see some of you text again, 205-834-9450. Would love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on some of the SEC schedules for 2025? What do you think about Alabama and Auburn, the schedules that they have? You want to comment on Bill Belichick going to North Carolina? You want to talk transfer portal, college football playoff, whatever it is, 205-834-9450. Get you on the text line, and we will get to your calls and text when we return here on JOX 94.5. 6:36. Welcome back into Morning JOX here on JOX 94.5. Hope you're staying warm on this Thursday morning. Temperatures still hovering around freezing here in the Birmingham metro area today, so make sure you stay nice and warm, whether you're out going to work, doing holiday shopping.
How much have you done?
I've actually gotten all of mine done.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I got the last of it done yesterday.
Wow. All right.
So I'm doing pretty good. And Paige's birthday is on Monday, so this is always a tricky time of year because I have to navigate birthday and then Christmas and try to get everything coordinated and money and so.
Oh, I know my birthday is 15 days after Christmas, so yeah.
I was about to say mine is right around yours because mine is January 5th. So yeah, me and Paige love this time of year because we have both of our birthdays and Christmas within a 3-week span of time. So
maybe you should. Well, I guess fun. I know why you did the date, whatever, and location and everything, but I felt like my dad was insanely smart, saying, "Hey, baby, why don't we get married on your birthday? That way, you always have a reason, to celebrate. Because it's always very, hey, it's my birthday, celebrate whatever me." So they got married on my mom's birthday. And Dad told me, he was like, "Oh yeah, I wanted to be about her." He was like, "This way, I ain't gonna forget one. Like if I forget one, I'll forget the other. But this way, if I forget one,
you're gonna remember the other
yeah,
probably."
Yeah.
That's pretty smart actually. I was gonna say though, just being off the last couple of days and going around running errands and stuff, I feel like more people are out holiday shopping in the middle of the day than normal. I don't know, but that's just kind of been my experience. The amount of traffic and stuff I saw at 11 o'clock on a random Wednesday was a little surprising, but hey, everyone's out there running their errands and getting their shopping done. And
I don't know if it feels like it's been that way for the last couple of months or so, that like I would go a lot of times being finished with Mac and Cube relatively early in the day. I could go see a movie, I could go run errands, whatever, do something. And what movie was it? It was Conclave. I went and saw Conclave a couple of weeks ago, and there were like 20 people in the theater at like I think it was a 12:15 show, and I'm like, "No, I ain't got jobs."
Yeah.
Like, I got one, but like I'm an early one.
Well, see, that's the funny perspective we have is because the way that our hours work, and they're just kind of odd where, I've definitely gotten looks from people before that I can tell they're like, "Do you not have a job?" And I'm like, "No, I do. I'm off work at 2:00 every day." I know it's kind of a weird schedule, but I have the same thought of, I guess a lot of people work from home or take extended lunches and
maybe
get to go
potentially
do their shopping. I live over by the Summit too, so it's just always kind of a nightmare around this time of the year. Anyways, I did want to correct one thing. So when I was going over the Auburn schedule, apparently the one I was looking at was not accurate with some of the home versus away games. So this is the official Auburn schedule. So if I messed up on any of those games, this is the official schedule for Auburn. So you're playing at Baylor, then Ball State, South Alabama at home. Then you're going to Oklahoma, to Texas A&M to open up SEC play. Then you're coming back to the Plains. You get Georgia and Missouri at home. Then you're going on the road to Fayetteville. Then you're back in Jordan-Hare for Kentucky. You're traveling to Vanderbilt on November 8th. Then you have a bye week. Then you get Mercer and Alabama at home to wrap it up. So they do not have 5 straight road games like the other schedule that I was looking at had some typos, I guess. So that is the Auburn schedule. They do not have 5 straight road games there in the middle part of the season, but you do start SEC play with Oklahoma, A&M on the road, and then coming back home to play Georgia. So that'll be a difficult stretch as well.
It seems like, once again, like at least they'll have a tough stretch kind of early on, especially with all those road games. But October and November, they only have 2 road games. That seems like, okay, all right. Like, we could work with some here. Yes, you have Georgia and Alabama and Missouri in that time. A lot of your tougher games will be early on. You'll be tested at Oklahoma, at A&M. But again, still to have 1, 2, 3, 4 conference home games, only 2 total road games on all of October and November across 9 weeks.
It's pretty good.
Okay, Auburn.
Yeah, well, there's a lot as we know, there's a lot on the line for Auburn in 2025. So we'll see if they're able to turn things around and get off to the hot start that we thought they were going to this year. Let's go to the phone lines. I know we got somebody on hold that wants to talk Auburn this morning. Don, how are you doing this morning, Don?
Hello, Conrad. I hope you had a couple of good days off, my friend.
I did, Don. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Tuesday with the rain and everything, we didn't have that great of a crowd and everything. But I got to talk to Molly's dad, which was nice.
Oh, very good. Yeah, he's a very nice guy.
He is a great guy, and I'm glad you corrected that because you scared me, man. With that, there ain't no way we got 5 straight home games.
No, I'm not going to tell you who to blame. It was my fault for looking at the wrong place. But yeah, they definitely had some typos in their list.
Well, yeah, and then I'm sure you know that the SEC schedule is always 4-4 anyway.
Yeah,
well, that's okay. That's okay, buddy. But I got to Barney talk to everybody about this on the transfer portal for Auburn. Conrad and John, good to hear from you today. Of the 2 quarterbacks that are visiting Auburn, Malik Murphy's down there now, and he's leaving this afternoon. And then this is kind of crazy. Jackson Arnold comes in right behind him.
Yep.
And he's staying for a couple of days. Which one of those 2 guys, which y'all think Auburn would be better off with?
Oh, so I'll be honest. So a couple of days ago, because I think it might have been on Tuesday when I was out, was when Malik Murphy entered the portal. I immediately thought of him, and when I saw his name go in the portal, I was like, man, that's somebody that Auburn should kick the tires on because he has, I guess he doesn't technically have SEC experience, but he played for Texas last year. I believe he set the record for most touchdown passes in a regular season at Duke this past season. And he fits the mold, I feel like, of what you want for a Hugh Freeze quarterback, right? He's mobile. He's a dual threat guy, but he's also a fairly competent passer, right? You're not giving up that part of the game for the dual threat nature of him. So I like Malik Murphy. He's got a little more experience than Jackson Arnold. So I don't know if Hugh Freeze would want to go that route over a guy that maybe is more of a developmental project still in Jackson Arnold. But I like Malik Murphy. I think that would be a good fit.
That's my opinion too. And also too, Pete Nakos last night put in a prediction in for the Georgia Tech receiver to come to Auburn.
Yep, Eric Singleton. Yep.
And boy, oh boy, would I love to have him. And also, too, the LSU receiver, Daniels, is visiting starting tomorrow.
Yep, I saw that. I saw he's, I think, Auburn, Georgia, Miami. There were a couple other schools I saw. So, yeah, a lot of interest in some of those guys. But, yeah, I've heard really good buzz about Singleton specifically to Auburn.
Okay, and also, too, yesterday, a funny conversation with my buddy Rob from Helena. He thinks that what's the kid's name at Alabama that is transferring, the backup quarterback?
Dylan Lonergan.
Yeah, he got an argument with Damien about him going to Auburn, and that ain't happening.
Well, hey, I mean, maybe basketball set the precedent, right, with Aiden Holloway, but I mean, I would be shocked.
No, Conrad, don't go there.
What about Antonio Kite? That worked well. It didn't really work out, but he did transfer from Alabama to Auburn.
Didn't Deontay Lawson do something like that?
Yeah.
Well, a long time ago, you had a running back, Corey Grant, that went from Alabama to Auburn a long time ago.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often, but hey, I'll tell you what, everything that I've heard about that Lonergan kid is that he is a special talent, and they've really liked what they've seen from him again. It's in practice and in scrimmages, but it'd be interesting.
To be honest with you, last night, some Georgia friends of mine are saying that they think Georgia's in for that kid.
I would not be surprised. I think he will have a number of suitors and a number of choices when he decides where he wants to go out of the portal.
Okay. Well, hey, real quickly, and John, buddy, if you're listening, I would hope you can make it up to our Christmas party Tuesday. And can you guys do me a favor and invite anybody that wants to come? I need to talk to Ryan Haney, make sure Ryan's going to be there. We're going to have a great crowd, guys. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, we are looking forward to that, Don. I will certainly try to get Paige and her mom to come out there and appreciate everything y'all do for us.
Hey, thanks, buddy. Appreciate you guys.
Yep. Thank you, Don. You too. Thank you. War Damn Don there chiming in with some transfer portal questions. So yeah, as he brought it up, if you missed the news yesterday, so Malik Murphy, the former Texas quarterback, he was the quarterback at Duke this past season, had a really nice year for them. He is currently visiting with Auburn down there on the Plains, and then Jackson Arnold coming in this weekend for a visit there. And then Ashton Daniels, the Stanford quarterback, who committed to Auburn a couple of days ago. So a lot of traction there in the quarterback room for Auburn. Again, we talked about it a little bit earlier in the week, but I think Ashton Daniels is clearly a guy that's brought in there for some depth, a guy that maybe they think they can develop into something in the future. But I would expect that if it's a Jackson Arnold, if it's a Malik Murphy, one of these guys, ultimately, if they do commit to Auburn, I would think that would be your quarterback one for 2025, or at least that would be the belief. So we'll keep you up to date on everything going on around the transfer portal for both Alabama and Auburn. We'll dive into some more of that news, as well as read your text messages when we return here on Morning JOX. You're listening to JOX 94.5. .651, welcome into Morning JOX here on JOX 94.5. Conrad and John Saber here with you for a couple more minutes before we hand you off to McElroy and Kublik in the morning. So going to get to your text here on the courtesy GMC text line 205-834-9450 in just a second. But first, some transfer portal news and just some personnel news around college football that I wanted to mention briefly. So we talked about the portal news with Malik Murphy, the Duke quarterback, visiting Auburn right now. Jackson Arnold coming in this weekend. You have Dylan Lonergan hitting the portal and being the first quarterback to leave from Alabama. And now you have Garrett Nussmeier, who announced yesterday there's some belief that he would be going into the NFL draft, but he announced yesterday that he is coming back for another year at LSU. And, you look at some recent quarterbacks there that have come back for another year, whether it's Jaden Daniels or Joe Burrow. I'm not saying that, he's a lock to win the Heisman next year, but they have a good track record here recently of quarterbacks coming back for one more year. Right, Saybear?
Sometimes it takes a little time to get acclimated, and once you do, you can kind of take off. So there is precedent there.
Yes, there certainly is that. We also have Hank Brown, the former Auburn quarterback. Been some buzz. Seems like he is going to be heading to Iowa. So a very different change of scenery there for Hank Brown, as it looks like he is going to be an Iowa Hawkeye. We have Connor Wigman, the quarterback from Texas A&M. It looks like he is going to transfer and go play at Houston and be a Houston Cougar. So that's staying there within the state of Texas, you would assume going to walk into the quarterback one job there at Houston. So some news there around the SEC as well. And then you have Keanu Coate, the former linebacker for Alabama, who's dismissed from the team earlier this year. We knew it was looking like it was going to come down to Ole Miss or Vanderbilt, and we now know that Vanderbilt is where Keanu Coate will continue his college football career. So a good get there for Clark Lee and the Commodores, grabbing somebody that I think would have certainly, if he had stayed on the team, had a role of some sort on this defense next year. So that could be a potential impact guy there in Nashville. All right, looking at some of your text here on the Courtesy GMC text line, we have Zach who texted in talking about anniversaries and birthdays that we kind of went down that rabbit hole earlier in the show. He says, my wife and I's anniversary is a Sublime song, so it makes it easy to remember. It's April the 26th. The song is actually April the 29th, but Bradley sings it as the 26th because he said that it sounded better. Okay.
Very interesting. Okay.
I didn't know that. Let's see. We have... Let's see. Mike says, headed to do some pressure washing in Tuscaloosa. Y'all stay warm today. Yeah, you too, Mike. That pressure washing is fun, but I wouldn't want to be doing it in the cold.
That's why I got on the radio. Physical labor is not something I'm a fan
of. We have somebody who's texting in from the state of Virginia. They say Auburn's schedule won't matter without a transformational quarterback. Well, maybe that guy's in the portal.
I don't think it's also Auburn's schedule that's like that. I'm pretty sure you could insert 100 plus college football teams and that would work.
Yeah, that is fair. For what it's worth, Fernando Mendoza, the Cal quarterback who beat Auburn earlier this year, and I know we had some discussions after that game of, wow, you're telling me Auburn couldn't go find a guy like that in the transfer portal? Well, he's now in the transfer portal. So if you're an Auburn fan and you want the Cal quarterback who had a pretty good year, 3,000 yards, 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's in the portal. He's available for you. Let's see. We have somebody saying we need to just play an all SEC schedule. Well, I definitely don't think that's going to happen with what you just saw with the college football playoff and the whole strength of schedule debacle. I don't think you're going to see just more SEC games now. Somebody else texting in asking where Molly is. So Molly filled in the last couple of days for me. Appreciate her very much. Saybear's now swapping out with her. So Molly will be back on 3-man front at 10 o'clock with myself and Landry Roberts as well. And then somebody else texts in and says, regarding the portal, if you're an Alabama fan, you have to feel pretty good about what you've lost so far, in the sense that, yeah, you really haven't lost any key pieces, I guess any of the big names that would really kind of make your jaw drop yet. So things looking pretty good, but there's still plenty of time for that to change. Well, appreciate you tuning in. McElroy and Kublik in the morning. They are next.